This is another episode of the CHGO Fire Podcast. Hello, happy Tuesday, even though things are definitely not happy for one team that plays at Soldier Field. We'll find out about the other one, I suppose, on Sunday. But until then, we are stuck with the Chicago Fire, who have lost 4 in a row. Guillermo Rivera is back on the show. And Guillermo, you always seem to turn up here when things are going south for the Fire. I apologize for always bringing you in as the almost like the voice of doom.
Yeah, I'm accustomed to that. It's okay. I covered them for 10 years, and it was the voice of doom for a decade. So it's my lot in life.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Tom Bogert of The Athletic, the man who is the insider for all things transfers in and out of MLS, to recap some of the biggest deals around the league this summer. The European transfer windows having closed this week, so should be about done with all the relevant deals. But eventually, we do have to talk about the games here. These last 2 were not good. We're also going to get to your thoughts, the listeners, on the Google form we sent out the other day of what players you would bring back to the Fire next year if you could only keep 5. Some of those results were pretty expected, and there were some interesting wrinkles. Basically, 2 guys ran away with it, and then after that, there's some room for debate. But let's rip this Band-Aid off and get it over with. Chicago Fire 0, Vancouver Whitecaps 1, a very frustrating loss at home at Soldier Field. Lionel Messi will not be here for another month, but Scottish Messi put on quite a show in this one. Guillermo, I think Rafa Chios is going to be having nightmares about Ryan Gauld for weeks to come.
Yeah, again, following the Leagues Cup break where they were playing well, I mean, right before they had a little run of, I think, a little bit of fortune with missing Hani Mukhtar starting the Nashville game. Then against 2 teams that you should beat at home, Montreal and Toronto, going to the Leagues Cup, you get trounced, not trounced, but you get bounced in Leagues Cup. After a couple of decent results, and I thought they played reasonably well during Leagues Cup, but to come back and have that sort of effort, I think, very disappointing. It's got to be for the Fire.
Yeah, so Gauld gets the assist in the 1 goal that's in the 19th minute. Brian White scores it. Chris Brady does his best to keep it out, but I think that goal is really less on Brady than a lot of other people. Carlos Terán can't let Brian White just step in front of him like that. So there's a lot up to that. The Fire played a 3-4-3, trying to match up with the 3-5-2 that Vancouver was playing. That failed miserably. While Mauricio Pineda looks comfortable in the middle of a back 3, neither Terán nor Chios looked at all comfortable having to cover that space wide. And Vancouver rightly just attacked the spaces behind the wingbacks and outside the center backs again and again and again. Klopas pulls the plug at halftime, 4-2-3-1. Things did look a little better, I suppose, but I mean, it does leave you wondering, like, beyond saying, oh, we're going to play back 3 because they play back 3. It's like the Fire were totally surprised at the Whitecaps doing the very obvious things.
Yeah, but they still, like I said, they made an adjustment at halftime and still lost 1-0. So it's basically, I don't care what formation you play in. Eventually, the talent is going to bear out, and the team that you have is the team that's going to that you're going to see at the end of the year in the standings. Whether or not you're playing 3 in the back, 4 in the back, 5 in the back, you can match up however you want. But this team is only built to go so far.
Chris Brady was fine in this game outside of the goal. He made some good saves. This game could have been a lot worse, and he was part of why it wasn't. After that halftime adjustment, the Fire were actually pretty good for about the first 20 minutes of the second half, and then just collectively both teams played just some awful soccer in the last quarter of the game. Vancouver looked frustrated that they weren't up 3 or 4-0 like they probably could have been, and so they didn't seem very interested. The Fire ran out of gas. We've seen a lot of bad soccer this season, but the last 20 minutes of that Chicago
was a rough
game,
watch, absolutely.
Like, neither team was good. We've seen the Fire be bad and the opposition be good. Neither happened here. The other thing I want to note on this game, in the 10th minute, Kai Kamara gets a great feed from Brian Gutierrez. He is 1-on-1 with the keeper, and he just absolutely blasts it right off the keeper's chest. Kai has been sitting 1 goal behind Landon Donovan for what feels like months at this point.
Right.
It just kind of feels like he might be cursed ever since he got within 1 of that eventual target, because, man, he can't buy a goal right now, even when he's got to put on a plate for him.
Maybe he's been standing too close to Kasper Shabilko. I don't know. It's the ghost of Landon Donovan keeping him from tying. But again, Kai Kamara is, 34, 35 years old. So how long?
37, 38?
So how long are you going to rely on Kai Kamara to be your best striker?
Well, yeah, again, we've talked about this on the show. This is not the role Kai Kamara was probably sold when he signed for the Fire. The whole idea is come in. This is closer to Kansas City, where your family lives and is from.
Right.
Easier commute, better situation there. You can come off the bench. You can be an elder statesman for a very young team, be a locker room presence, be a leader, work with Ezra, who you know from back in the day. And instead, that quickly turned into, Kasper Schmeichel is not, back surgery has not solved that problem. Koutsias isn't ready yet. Oh, by the way, we fired your buddy who was the head coach who brought you in. And so, no, I can't imagine this season has at all been what Kai Kamara was hoping it would be. Of course, between him and Schmeichel, one of those guys has a contract next year. One of them doesn't. The one who has one isn't Kai Kamara. Not many home games left because of the Bears' schedule forcing a front-loaded home schedule. Can't be losing the home games.
No, absolutely.
Especially not to another team who, Vancouver is battling for playoff position in the West, which is just hilarious because, man, if the Fire were a Western Conference team, they would be weirdly comfortably in the playoffs right now because, my God, the Western Conference is has like 2 or 3 good teams. Everyone else is terrible. Shout out to our friends out at DNVR Rapids, who I'm sure have a full plate today after the dismissal of head coach Robin Fraser this morning. At least the folks at PHNX and have Phoenix Rising in the USL Championship. They seem to be having a good time. So good for them. If you thought the Vancouver game was bad, oh boy, you had not seen anything yet. DC United 4, Chicago Fire 0, and I'm allowed to swear on this show, and I do it very rarely.
Yeah, it's allowed.
Holy shit, that was bad.
Yep.
Like, just Guillermo referenced it. He's been on the beat a long time. We have seen some bad Fire games. Like, we've seen some just incredible blown leads. We've seen some Brian Sandela from the Sun-Times trademark whatevering for games and games on end. My God, this was just, I'll be honest, I didn't watch this live. I watched it back later. What a great decision by me to just spare myself the pain of watching this in real time.
And that was over early, and as bad as the score was, it could have been worse. There was a complete capitulation to a team that's right below you and a direct competitor for that 9th and final playoff spots. Just confounding, just really a confounding effort.
Yeah, Fire were 9th, DC United were 10th when this game started. Those had flipped by the end of it. Also, I think you got to give credit. A lot of people, when Wayne Rooney was brought back in early this season to DC, were kind of skeptical that was going to really work, but him and the players have gelled. If you think things are messy here, things are a mess in DC. There's basically open war between ownership, the front office, and the players and the fans. No one's on the same side as anybody. Maybe you could say the players and the fans are kind of allies in this fight, but it's an organizational mess. They're winning anyway, and I think that only more highlights. You can't make any excuses. Nothing is set up well for DC here.
Well, Rooney's also out of contract, and there is an issue with whether or not they bring him back.
No one on that entire staff, basically, or team, has their future on that team secured. And they went out and they beat the Fire 4-0 because the players have decided, we're going to actually try to give these fans who we know have been through the ring or something, we're going to try to make the playoffs. We don't need to break this game down in excruciating detail, but I do want to go through the goals because there's just hilariously obvious mistakes on all of them. The first goal, Mateus Klick is dribbling upfield, and Gaston Jimenez could easily take 2 steps forward and prevent a pass. Instead, Gaston trots in reverse. Klick plays a pass long. Christian Benteke, dialing back the clock to his Aston Villa days, turns Rafa Chios just completely inside out in a one-on-one battle. Real easy, but man, this is Taylor Twellman tweeting about it level bad from Gaston Jimenez here.
Yeah, Jimenez, I thought had been better for the most part this season. Yeah, he'd been fine. But the red card, this effort, really at some point, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, you really have to question the people who are bringing in Jimenez. And they had a chance to move on, but they decided to take the DP tag off and extend his contract, which...
And you only get one punished player buyout a year. So even if there's a total change in the sporting department, there is going to just be a cornucopia overflowing with options of, we can rip up one contract out of this entire pile. Which one is it going to be? And there's not an obvious answer, as we will get into.
Right.
Also, Rafa Chios just allows himself to get pulled totally out of position on that goal by Benteke. He's 5 or 10 yards deeper than the fullbacks. Tehran has pushed upfield, and that's one issue. But if you look, Suke and Aceves are basically level with each other. They are on what is clearly an agreed upon line. And Benteke just wanders downfield, and rather than holding the line and trying to play any sort of offside trap, Shields just follows him and stays between him and Chris Brady, setting up just a complete posterization opportunity. And to see Shiho struggle in that way, that's just so disheartening.
He's arguably been their best player this year. You can make an argument for Brian Gutierrez.
Gutierrez and Pineda get shouts, and
yes,
that's about that.
So it's disheartening to see your captain and your best player just being toyed.
It almost got just silly, and I'm almost a little sad, given that it ended up 4-0, 5-0, and this own goal would have been better. Arno Suke kicks the ball into his own net about as hard as you will ever see anybody kick the ball into their own net. He is only spared because DC United are called for an offside. On the second goal, Tehran and Shios both look like they're running in quicksand. Di Pietro just kind of taps in again. No chance for Brady. This was a 2-on-2. Di Pietro, Di Pietro, and Benteke 2-on-2 versus Tehran and Shios. And I am a slow person. I am not quick, but I could not have looked slower than Tehran and Shios just slowly trotting back as Di Pietro just runs right past both of them on this play. And I do feel for Chris Brady the way this was going at this point, because there's nothing he can do about any of this.
Yeah, there's no room for error now. Like you said, the home games are few and far between, so they've got to maximize just about everything from here on out.
The third goal, I don't know if I've ever seen this exact sequence happen. A foul that is a clear penalty kick, but the referee letting play go on just long enough for the player who committed the foul to kick the ball into his own goal after bringing a guy down in a blatant penalty. Shios is left for dead by Benteke again, so Tehran American football tackles him. It's definitely a PK, but then as Tehran is falling with Benteke in his grasp, his right foot flicks out and chips Chris Brady. It's a ridiculous sequence. It probably should have just been a PK, but the referee holds his breath just long enough for Carlos Tehran to score a very silly own goal. It's 3-0. You have to laugh at this point.
That's the beauty of sports. There's always something you've never quite seen before, and that was one of them.
And then the fourth goal, Carlos Tehran is 30 yards away from where he should be for no apparent reason. He does get back eventually, but he forgets to do one thing once he does get back. Figure out where Christian Benteke is, because Tehran is left there standing as Benteke taps in to a totally empty net at the back post. 4-0 DC United. Playing with fire asks, is there really a difference on how Ezra played and how Frank played? No. I mean, most of the time it's been the same kind of 4-2-3-1 system. The devil's advocate argument would be, if you look at the Fire's roster, is there really any other way to play rather than simply saying you have to have an attacking midfield line of Haile-Selassie, Shaqiri, and Gutierrez, and then from there, the rest of it's kind of irrelevant?
Yeah, there was a bump with Klopas coming on, but we've had this conversation.
Notably, that
from
was the
Shaqiri
weird
was better with Klopas. But again, I think I made this point earlier. This is their roster. No matter who the coach is, you're only at a 7, 8, 9 possibly maximum effort at the end of the year. So this is where they're at. This is who they are. At the beginning of the year, I think there were 10 or 11 MLSsoccer.com experts who made predictions on the season, and every one of them had them 13th or lower. That's not coincidence. This is who they are. They're not a very good team.
This roster. It hasn't changed much. For the segment we're doing with Tom Bogert later, I went on Transfermarkt and went through the list of all these summer transfers that every MLS team had made in and out. There was only one team that had 0 names listed, and I think that's kind of cheeky because Ousmane Doumbia technically is a transfer that they must have just missed, but he did go from one club owned by the same person to a different club owned by the same person. So, yeah, the Fire were the only team that did not have a name listed in or out. They were the only inactive team in the transfer market in the entire summer window, in the entire league. Now, not to say that being active gets you anywhere, because as we'll touch on, New York City changed like 2/3 of their team. They were bad, so they got rid of everybody, and they are still bad despite changing everyone. So that doesn't always work. But Guillermo, what do we even do after that game? I mean, do you bench a bunch of guys? Do you sit Tehran and Suke and Shihos and put a bunch of different dudes out there? It's a no-win situation for Frank Klopas at this point because he's going to be out of a job. The team's not going to make the playoffs. The decisions of who stays and who goes roster-wise will not be his. It's just this run of losses has put everybody in a really thankless position.
Yeah, they're stuck in the endless cycle of change and bad and change and bad. And this is where they're at again now. Like you said, Klopas isn't going to be the head coach next year. I don't think he has any real interest in being the head coach. And again, what do you do here? At this point, you have to continue to play the best lineup you can play. You have a few homegrown players, younger players who maybe you can make a case for, hey, let's get those kids out there and find out what they can do.
That's honestly been one of the bigger disappointments in the past couple of years, and I hope that changes now because one of the things that's coming up with the roster is you got a lot of those kids, that group that was signed right at the beginning of right before the pandemic, who's all supposed to go to Forward Madison, yada, yada.
Yeah.
All those guys have options coming up this winter, and we've basically seen none of them play soccer except Brady and Guti.
Well, it's possible that they are not MLS quality players.
It is possible they are not MLS quality players, but it can't possibly get any worse. Let's take a look at the remaining schedule for the Chicago Fire. It's it is what it is. Montreal, Columbus, home against New England. That's going to be tough. New England has just been a superb team this season. They basically, I think I saw from an Athletic piece the other day, they spend less time losing than any other team in MLS. But apparently they're going to clear out their coaching staff this winter anyway, which is odd. Then they go to Red Bull Arena to play the Red Bulls, who are also bad. There's your big date, October 4th, home versus the Lionel Messi traveling circus that is Inter Miami CF, who will be needing a win in that game to probably make the playoffs. Their make or break is this next 2 weeks. They got 3 games without Messi. What can they do in those? Then home against Charlotte for the home finale. Don't be surprised if that game gets moved SeatGeek, because that's kind of what tends to happen with those games. And then they finish out things a weirdly awkward 2 weeks later after an international break at we don't know where because New York City doesn't have a home stadium after the start of August. Could be Yankee Stadium, could be Citi Field, could be Red Bull Arena, could be your house, listener. You never know when NYCFC is coming to you. They played
Do you have a big backyard?
I don't, but there is a park near me that has 8 full-size soccer fields. So, if they want to come on up to Montrose Beach, they can.
There we go.
They can do that. But no, they played a home game in Los Angeles once to just give you an idea of how weird New York City is with their inability to have a stadium. From those remaining games, asked on Twitter the other day, we're going to get over 1.5 wins or under 1.5 wins from the Fire this season. 79% said under, and I am inclined to agree. Looking at these games, this next Montreal one's you could win that one. New York City, final day of the season, is going to be a total dead rubber for both teams. So
the Red Bulls is a winnable game.
The Red Bulls is a dead rubber game probably. So those are the 3 you got to look at as kind of your half chances to get wins, and then are you going to turn 2 of those into W's? At Columbus versus New England versus Miami versus Charlotte, I have a bad feeling.
We saw what Miami did to LAFC this weekend.
Jeez. You got the defending MLS champs, and they just got annihilated. We're going to talk about the Chicago Fire's roster and your thoughts on it, everyone out there listening. But first, a word from our sponsors, Ray Chevy Dodge Jeep Ram, about their grand reopening. Get your ducks in a row because it's the grand reopening of Ray CDJR in Fox Lake. You can flock September 9th and celebrate our Get Ducked event with free prizes and your chance to win $1,000. Plus, during Jeep Adventure Days, get employee pricing on all new 2023 Jeep Gladiator models. The grand reopening of Ray Chevy Dodge Jeep Ram in Fox Lake is only on September 9th, but savings will last all September long. All right, Guillermo, let's talk about the Chicago Fire roster and where we're at. This is kind of a general theme. I saw a tweet the other day right after the game from, I believe, at Fire Transfers on Twitter, basically making the point, if there was an expansion draft next year, they were pointing out that there was only 3 or 4 players they felt strongly about keeping. And so I figured, let's see what people think. So shout out to everybody who came in and responded on this. We're going to take a look at the top 5, as well as some honorable mentions. Coming in at number 1 with a whopping 95.7% of the vote is Brian Gutierrez. There were like 4 of you that didn't vote for Guti. And if you were listening, I would like you to please explain yourself in the comments, because no, he has not been phenomenal these last few games, but like, why would you not want Brian Gutierrez still on the Fire next season? Homegrown, showing a lot of promise. That him in the top spot did not surprise me at all.
Not at all. And Gutierrez, if you look at where his status might be for next year, is he going to be back? He may have options overseas. There is interest overseas.
We mentioned it earlier this season. England changed their rules a bit. Well, no, they changed MLS's standing. They moved MLS up a rung in how good the English Football Association / government thinks your league is. And so now, before where Guti would have needed a U.S. men's national team appearance, he no longer does. I think just playing for the U20s is enough. Second place, and this was a kind of a 2-horse race for first, Chris Brady. The only way Chris Brady is not a member of the Fire next year is if he goes the Gaga Selena route and says, this is not fun at all. Please sell me to some giant European team. And
he's
end
not
of this nightmare for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he's quite as far along as Gaga was. I think there may be a European future ahead for Brady. I'm just not sure that he's quite ready for it yet.
Yeah, I think there will be offers this winter. I do not think they will be what the Fire want. I think basically with Brady, the Fire just get to point at the Gaga deal and say, 10 plus 5. If you can't do that, we will talk to you when you're interested in doing that.
Yeah.
So my gut says we're at least 6 months, if not a year, away from Chris Brady getting those kind of rumors.
I would agree with that.
That I could see next year being his Gaga year. He puts up a few clean sheets early in the season. There's rumors maybe a sale agreed in the summer. He finishes out the year, and then off to Europe he goes. Gaga, meanwhile, looking pretty good in Belgium for a team that was fighting relegation last year. That seems to be going well so far. Big drop-off from our top 2. Third place, and this was interesting because this didn't reflect what a few people who just commented, a couple people commented on Twitter, their responses, what they voted, and this surprised me based on those responses. Rafael Schijos, 61.3% of people who responded said they wanted him back next year, which I thought to see him in third was very interesting.
Well, that kind of gives you an indication of where fans think this team is. There are only really 2 players, and the 2 homegrown players that the fan base really thinks, okay, I want these guys back, or we should have these guys back.
Yeah, only 61%. When you had 5 choices, you had to pick 5 players. And so for second place to be 86 and third to be 61, that really does indicate, as you're saying there, that, people felt really strong about Guti and Brady and absolutely nobody else.
Yeah, and Schijos has actually been pretty good other than the last month or so. As we go down the list here, you're going to mention a couple other guys who have flashed, but, we'll get to it.
The guy in fourth I expected to be in third. That's Mauricio Pineda, getting 54.8% of the vote. If I had a vote for Fire Player this season, I would probably vote for Pineda. He's done the thankless task of switching positions constantly. He's showed very well as a center back, which is not his natural position. He's looked better there this year than he had in past years. Is he the sort of guy who you probably envision as a starter on a championship team? No, probably not, but he'd be a great guy to have on the bench on a championship team.
Mauricio Pineda is a solid MLS player, and he has been through the course of his professional career.
Yeah,
he has been a quality MLS player.
So, yeah, I find it very strange that he did not do better. Fifth place, rounding out the top 5, Marin Haile-Selassie. This was close. You'll see in the fine print if you're watching that this was a close run thing, but at 45%, Haile-Selassie squeaks in as the people's final choice in 5th. I think there was a lot of skepticism about this signing at the beginning of the year. I think he is also in that Pineda category now if he's a solid MLS player. But I don't think anybody would argue that there could be an upgrade potentially there if the right player came along.
Right. Would anybody really be upset if Haile-Selassie isn't on the roster next year?
And yeah, if Chris Mueller comes back, what does that look like? Speaking of which, the honorable mentions, Carlos Turan comes in 6th at 38.7%. I had Turan in my 5. It was a tough decision, but I left out Haile-Selassie. Chris Mueller in 7th, 33%, did exactly 1/3. And then the only other guy to get above single digits was Georgios Koutsias. He comes in at 19%, which I think is he looks promising. We don't know what we have there yet. We have 3 dishonorable mentions. There are only 3 players who got 0 votes. Kasper Schmilko, Wyatt Omsberg, and Spencer Ritchie. Spencer Ritchie, backup goalkeeper. I like Spencer a lot, but I can understand why no one's too torn up about the backup keeper. Wyatt Omsberg, I just feel bad for Wyatt because, Man, like, that guy was looking really solid last year, got injured, and has basically never returned, despite the fact that this defense has looked pretty lousy at times. Can we get him starting in Montreal this weekend? Because, I mean, why not? And then Shibilko, kind of self-explanatory, why no one is super interested to see him back.
I had Mueller in my 5. I thought he was their best player last year at the window after his acquisition. Where is your talisman? Where is your big DP, Xherdan Shaqiri? Fans don't. It makes no impression at all.
5% of respondents wanted Shaqiri back. Something like that. The funniest one I have to say, though, and I alluded to this on Twitter last night, and I guess I'll spill the beans here. Through 64 responses, 0 people had voted for Gaston Jimenez. I texted you about this, and within the next 5 minutes, Gaston had 2 votes. Not sure what happened there, but I found that very funny. Somebody clearly went through and voted for all the kids, or all the kids just voted for themselves, which I think also is, I like that mentality. I mean, if I was a 19-year-old on the Fire, I would also vote for 4 guys who I really liked a lot and then vote for me.
Well, the kicker is some of these veterans who are, like you said, fans are indifferent whether they come back or not, or apparently most of them don't want these guys back, are locked in for next year and in some cases a year after. So they're in another critical offseason where Mansueto has to make the right move with the sporting director and the general manager or president of soccer operations, or however you want to call it.
So a couple weeks ago on the show, we talked about MLS free agents in general. Again, specifically, those youth players they are not like even they're restricted free agents. They would only become free agents if like the club would have to like sell their rights. Basically, they can't just walk away. Here's your entire list: Fabian Herbers has an option. Kai Kamara is out of contract. Wyatt Omsberg has an option. Spencer Ritchie has an option. That's it. Even if you change the entire sporting department, that is not a lot of wiggle room with which to make a lot of changes. As I alluded earlier, you only get 1 contract buyout a year, which means, yes, you either could buy out Jimenez, you could buy out Shibilko. You cannot buy them both out.
Right.
Now, if I prognosticated a bit here, I would say your most favorable route out of that scenario was Gaston Jimenez goes back to somewhere in South America, and you buy out Shibilko. But
maybe Shaqiri goes to Lugano, which to me would be a sensible thing. Just
at some
open
point,
up that
does
DP
seem
spot.
inevitable that eventually, even he's gonna be like, yeah, this isn't really, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Going home would be nice. Lake Como, wonderful. Just you can play soccer and live on Lake Como. Like that seems like a pretty nice life,
right?
All things considered, especially if that's an option for you. Christian A in the chat asks, who should we bring in as a head coach? I mean, I have no idea. Robin Fraser, who got fired this morning in Colorado, is certainly a name that goes on the list. A lot of the guys who've been fired, though, this year are not particularly inspiring. Gio Savarese in Portland. Bob Bradley, Reclamation Project in Toronto. No. Gustav Struber, who then immediately got a job with a different Red Bull franchise in Europe. It's just... I think we talked about this earlier with Ezra versus Klobos. Unless things above them change, unless the roster changes, the manager's kind of irrelevant, right?
That's right. You can. The manager at this point is is a secondary question. To me, the bigger question is who is your sporting director next year, because that's going to determine what the direction of this franchise or this club is going to be for the foreseeable future. They've already alienated enough fans that we keep saying this every year. This is a pivotal off season, but again, we're at the same point where we've been for the better part of the last 12 years. What or who is going to be the individual that comes in and actually turns this thing around?
So the Fire have a lot of moves to make, but in our next segment, we're going to talk about moves that literally everybody else has been making, because the Fire didn't make any this summer, but there has been some interesting things going on in the world of MLS transfers. But first, a word from our sponsors, Shady Rays. And as usual, I got to put on my Shady Rays to do this ad read. A pair of Shady Rays I purchased with this great deal that I'm about to tell you about from our friends at Shady Rays. You can take the sun on with gear that is built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered for the warm weather ahead with premium polarized shades at an affordable price. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company that offers a world-class product that's just as good as any expensive pair we've ever worn, and including some 7-letter 2-word brands. They are just as good, if not better. As Lawrence does the mental math in his head. Durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures. That is not all. Shady Rays also offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by a lost and broken replacement guarantee. If you lose or break your pair, even on the first day you own them, they told us they're going to send you a brand new pair. No questions asked, so you can wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after you give them your money. Together with their customers, Shady Rays is also providing much-needed support to nonprofit partners across the U.S. through the Shady Rays Impact Project. From building play sets for pediatric cancer patients to providing young adults with MS the outdoor adventure of a lifetime, Shady Rays is making an impact in your community and others like it, now and for years to come. If you don't love your Shady Rays, you can exchange for a new pair or return them for free within 30 days. No risk at all when you shop. Their team always has your back. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Go to shadyrays.com and use code CHGO for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses, where you can try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 satisfied Shady Rays customers. Tom Bogert of The Athletic going to be joining us in a minute. Sent me a note a couple minutes ago that he's running maybe just 1 or 2 minutes late, but he is a very busy man as his work never stops. He was literally tweeting this morning about various deals getting done and about, I think I saw this morning about how there's an American teenager who might be positioning himself as Barcelona's new backup goalkeeper. So that's potentially intriguing. Not that Marc-Andre Ter Stegen is going anywhere, but I mean, it's been a weird summer to be an MLS fan, particularly from a Fire perspective, where they've done nothing but bring in Ousmane Doumbia on loan. I mean, obviously the biggest story is everything going on in Miami. And I guess, Guillermo, you have the last time you were on the show was before all that unfolded. What have you made of the spectacle that is whatever we're calling what's going on down in what was the worst team in MLS until 2 weeks ago?
Well, like they've gone from the worst team in MLS to maybe the most entertaining team in the last rememberable future, or past, I should say. It wasn't only Messi, we have to remember. It's also Busquets and Jordi Alba. So they didn't just bring in one guy and say, here, fix it. They brought in 2 other professional, international star players
Messi
who
and
have
friends.
played with Messi, who are familiar with what he needs to be successful. And that's probably been just as important for them as Messi has.
Yeah, I mean, because when you think about it, the first couple games, the thing that was standing out to me was not just Messi. It was Sergio Busquets was being allowed to just have all day to just quarterback and just ping passes around. And people seem to have learned their lesson a bit. And now Jordi Alba is suddenly an attacking threat. They're playing more recently in this back 3 setup, back 5 setup, where Alba is a left wing back with all the license in the world to get forward. Messi happily providing him assists. It's just wild to watch. And I honestly think, though, the key to all of it is Tata Martino. When those rumors started rumbling that, Messi's not only going to Miami, Tata is going to go be the coach, it's really all clicked into place there because, I mean, obviously MLS fans know what Tata did in his brief stint at Atlanta United and what happened immediately after he left, how important he was to how that team was functioning. I mean, this just, yes, having the best player maybe ever certainly is going to paper over a lot of cracks, but man, like, for all the rest of it and elevate the rest of the roster, I mean, I think that's maybe the best move of the year in MLS is them hiring Tata.
Yes. Well, Nashville did well to sort of slow them down. They got everybody behind the ball and sort of say come back and hit them on a counter. But again, they did that at the expense of their attack.
Right.
So, and a 0-0 draw, and you don't know how much of that was just tired legs. Miami's played a lot of games, and they've got a lot of games in a short period of time coming up here. So how much of that was just Miami kind of running out of gas in a midweek game against Nashville?
Yeah, I think Nashville's an interesting one to watch. I think certainly as an MLS Cup pick, they have a lot of interesting upside, given that, A, they have shown an ability to slow down Messi. Now, again, they sacrificed their offense to do that. So it's really hard to say where that's going to go. When we talk about the Fire, though, before we get into other non-Fire teams, like it does leave you puzzled because if there was money to spend on a designated player number 9, and that's still allegedly going to happen at some point, it's just I'm not really sure what to make of when you see even teams below the Fire in the table wheeling and dealing and trying things. It's just Okay, we won't know the context until the season's over and we see like who stays and who goes. And if we get an announcement the day after that NYCFC game that, Sebastian Pelzer and George Heights have been fired, then it's like, okay, well, we get it now. But at the moment, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, and to me, that is an indication that, hey, you've sort of put the brakes on Heights and Pelzer in what they can do. But again, if you're doing that, why not make the move now? Why continue on with this sort of farce of a second half of the season following a window where you did absolutely nothing other than add Ousmane Doumbia to fill your third DP spot? It makes little sense. If you're going to make the move, make the move.
We are now excited to bring in the man who knows more than anything about how things go around in and out of MLS, transfers and beyond. Also, as I mentioned, some tweeting about American teenage goalkeepers in Spain this morning. He is everywhere all at once, and he joins us now, Tom Bogert of The Athletic. Tom, thanks so much for taking a few minutes here at the end of this CHGO Fire episode.
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me. Thanks for adhering to my slight delay here on scheduling. It's been a busy morning.
Oh yeah, it's always busy, even though the transfer windows are largely shut. Turkey and Saudi Arabia open until Thursday, so some strange things could still happen. Tom, I think to start, we were just talking about the phenomenon that, of course, was Miami bringing in Messi and Busquets and Jordi Alba and Tata Martino. But I wanted to ask you about the other guys they've signed, because I feel like this is going to go under the radar, but is going to be so important. We saw it the other night in LA. How would you describe how big a deal the signings of Facundo Farias, Diego Gomez, and Tomas Aviles are going to be if Miami wants to get where they're going?
Yeah, I've been talking about this for the last few weeks because this is extremely important, and it goes to the investment that ownership has made and the identification and deal making that the front office has done for these targets. They spent obviously a lot of money to bring in Lionel Messi and Sergio Busquets. And then they spent $15 million in combined transfer fees for Toto Aviles, Facundo Farias, and Diego Gomez. These are three extremely highly rated South American, under 22 players. Diego Gomez is in the full Paraguayan national team. Aviles is the most expensive center back in MLS history at $7 million. And Farias was being linked with a $15 million transfer a year and a half ago before he tore his ACL. He was one of the brightest talents in Argentina. For Miami to be able to sign those three players, and the U22 initiative is such a great way to stretch your depth and take big swings without having, necessarily really big repercussions. Because if one of these three players, the only other way they could be on the team, maybe Gomez could have been with Tam, but the only other way that they could have been on the team for the most part is a DP spot. So you get to keep your DP spots. You have to take three big swings with the U22 initiative. They hit your salary cap at $150,000 or $200,000 each. It's a really smart way for ambitious clubs to maximize their spend on the roster. This is one of the few ways that you can, separate yourself from other clubs.
Just don't do that ambitious spending on Ignacio Aliceta. Be sure to go onto The Athletic and check out Tom's piece from a couple weeks ago on how Miami are pulling all of this off, allegedly. It's really great reporting and answers a lot of the questions that I think a lot of people have about Miami's setup. Tom, we want to run quickly here with you through several big transfers. I think we got to start with the biggest money one, and that's Georgi Petrovic going from New England Revolution to Chelsea. 15 million pounds, I think it was the reported fee on that one. Is
17.5 million US.
Yeah. Is this just Matt Turner 2.0? Did the Revolution just pull a second rabbit out of their hat with this one?
He's better, man. And I love Matt Turner. I was one of the first, I think, to give my Matt Turner bona fides. I was one of the first to kind of be saying that he should be the starting U.S. national team goalkeeper. So again, I don't say this lightly, that I conclusively Georgi Petrovic is better. Those are the two of the best shot stoppers I've ever seen in this league. And it's insane to me that they played for the same team and back-to-back. The fact that New England replaced Matt Turner with Georgi Petrovic is unreal. It was fantastic against scouting, fantastic player. Well done to Georgie for everything he's accomplished. And they were holding really strong to, we're not going to let you go this summer. We understand that we'll probably lose money. We could accept higher offers right now for FC Nantes and Nottingham Forest. They were look, I'm sorry. We want to keep you. We're pushing for MLS Cup, and we'll let you go in the winter or whatever. He didn't love that, but he kind of understood it after a couple of days. And then 2 weeks later, Chelsea came in, and there's no chance that you could reject it again at that figure. and what it would do to both Petrovic and the locker room if they kind of denied him this opportunity. It just made too much sense on all fronts, and they were able to bring in another goalkeeper. So yeah, it was a really great move. And again, like this is how you continue to build your reputation by selling these players. Or like Matt Turner, Zach Steffen leaves Columbus for Manchester City, and then Matt Turner goes to Arsenal from New England, and then Georgi Petrovic goes for $17.5 million.
Yeah, Georgi Petrovic going for roughly double, maybe even slightly more than double what Matt Turner went for just a year ago. So that's really remarkable. Quickly, I want to ask you, Tom, about one that people might have not seen, but LAFC just sold a player to Barcelona, and that's not something that happens often. Mamadou Fall had spent the last year on loan in Spain. For those who haven't been following along, can you fill in the blanks there for people who might have missed what is actually a pretty big transfer in terms of MLS outgoings?
Yeah, Mamadou Fall was one of the most highly rated young players when he broke through with LAFC. He was 18 when he was getting his first starts, and around the world, and it's like, again, you guys know better than anybody with Gago Slonina, 17-year-old goalkeepers don't start in top division flights. 18-year-old center backs really are like not just like getting some starts, but like unquestioned first choice center back for LAFC when they were among the best teams in the league. Like he was one of the most highly rated young players in MLS. And Villarreal signed him on loan with a purchase option. And everybody at LAFC and, myself, people around the league that like really know like Mamadou Fall, we were all assuming like he's gone. Like it'll be a loan with a purchase option. They'll trigger the purchase option. Apparently like talks broke down and Fall came back. Villarreal were trying to sign him as well, but Barcelona came in and it was pretty clear that was going to be his top choice. So Barcelona come in with a loan with a purchase option as well, just like Villarreal did. It was described to me as like part of that has to do with accounting, that Barcelona, FIFA fair play, all that stuff. You've read about their difficulties that, they couldn't do a transfer fee right now. So I guess we'll see in a year if this is triggered, but it would be like, I think up to or around 7 million if all add-ons ended up getting hit. So it's a really significant deal for a really highly rated young player. And again, he's definitely going to be with Barcelona be at first. I'm sure that's where the majority of his minutes are going to go. But again, like Barcelona really see something in him.
We're actually running a bit short on time here ourselves, so we're going to do, I think, 3 quick fire last questions here, Tom, and get you out of here on these. So short answers on all of these. First off, Christian Oliveira from Almeria to LAFC. Is he finally the guy to complete that trio that LAFC can't figure out with Bouanga and Vela?
Now, Mario Gomez is supposed to be that guy, the center forward. So Kiki Oliveira is another in the mold of like Stipe Biuk or Matej Bogusz, like of, hey, this is the highly talented young player. I've heard a couple scouts I talked to in MLS that this kid's extremely talented and hopefully his head's on right. And it seems like he is. He's with the Uruguayan national team. So it's just them taking another swing.
We saw their defensive exploits twice last couple weeks against Miami. Does Sam Surridge, striker from Nottingham Forest, who's hit the ground running, does he make Nashville SC a true MLS Cup contender?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm such a sucker for Hani Mukhtar and the defensive structure that this team has that I would have called them a legitimate contender for MLS Cup without him. And he's come in and like he could be the difference that takes him over the top, where it's not just the Hani Mukhtar show. And they've done a little bit better this year with Jacob Stapelberg and Fafa Pico as being like secondary, tertiary scoring options. So if Sam Surridge continues this run of form, and I think it's real, all the underlying numbers in the championship, suggested this. I mean, the goal scoring numbers weren't perfect, but like he seems like the real deal. And I think based on everything I've read, seen, and talked to, like this is what they're expecting.
And then finally, San Jose has made themselves the island of misfit toys for North American strikers. From where you sit, and what you've heard about what they think of these players, who looks better positioned in your mind to revive some hype into their career? Canadian international Ayo Akinola or U.S. international and Leagues Cup wonder Matthew Hoppe?
I would lean slightly to Hoppe just because at least he's been fit in his career. Like Ayo Akinola has struggled a lot with injuries, so I'm not sure, if he'll have the first path towards more minutes or not. But Hoppe, just because I think he's a better bet to stay fit, and both of them took a hit when Cade Cowell wasn't sold to Bologna. Like I think it honestly should have been. There was the offers were there and it should have been sold. So now like they're all, both Hoppe and Ayo are going to be on the outside looking in for playing time. But that's not to suggest that they won't, get minutes and make a difference.
One more fire-related question for you, Tom. I know you had the Doumbia signing at the end of June, right before the window opened. Were you surprised that they filled a DP spot with with Doumbia, and were there any other inklings about potentially filling that a need for a striker or a wing player with a DP at any point during the summer?
Yeah, I mean, the plan all winter was a DP forward, and then that kind of never materialized. They weren't like looking for, say, like, the $12 million player. It was more like Hwang Ui-jo, who would have been like maybe not necessarily like Doumbia is a tammable DP. Like he's if he stays, he's not going to be a DP next year, or at least he doesn't have to be. I don't, things change, roster building is fluid. So this was kind of the idea to retain flexibility. So I'd assume that they're going to, take a really big swing on a center forward next year, whether that's George Heights making the decision or, somebody else that comes into the front office. I think it makes sense that they're going to wait until at least the head coach is in, let alone whether there's going to be more additions to the front office. So, it kind of makes sense to me. And the center forwards have been fine, serviceable, right? Like, so, we'll see what the winter brings. But again, I would have said the same thing last year, that I thought they were going to bring in take a big swing at center forward in the winter. So, what the hell do I know?
Big swing at center forward, turn into Kai Kamara and Georgios Koutsias. Not probably what Fire fans had in mind. Hopefully, though, there will be a lot more Fire-related reporting from Tom Bogert this offseason with moving and shaking to the roster, but only time will tell. Tom, we'd love to talk to you for longer, but we got to get out of here ourselves. Tom Bogert, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us here on CHGO Fire.
Thanks, Tom.
Cheers, guys.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Guillermo Rivera, thank you again for coming in. Always appreciate your level-headedness and the way you assess the Fire. Again, I think you were a good servant. I think everyone agreed to the Fire beat for a long time, but I don't think anyone can blame you for now going on beat emeritus status.
Well, thanks for having me. Always fun to be here.
So we will be back in a couple weeks with another episode of CHGO Fire. We are counting down to that messy game here in Chicago because, let's be honest, it's the thing we have most to look forward to. But hopefully the Fire can win once or twice along the way. I'm Alex Campbell. This has been CHGO Fire, and we'll talk to you next time.